Well, we are back from spring break. Excuse me. And I don't know about you all, but it was so nice to just kind of do whatever I wanted to do and not be worried about building lessons and checking emails and all of that great stuff that we're having to do right now to make sure that your learning is continuing. But one of the things that I did notice on Sunday of last week, before we actually were officially on spring break, is that there were only about, I want to say 20, maybe 22 fifth and sixth graders combined that had taken their test. Now, that's like a quarter of y'all. So I am recording this on Saturday. You're watching it on Monday. So on Monday morning, I'm going to be driving to school to pick up any tests that were hand delivered. At that point, I will be actually grading the test, but I will be calling to talk with your parents. And letting them know that you have not done the test, that the test will be going in as a 0 unless I hear from you. And we make some type of arrangement. I cannot leave that window open because it's too difficult for me to keep up with that. There was a deadline of Saturday, and the test was open on Friday. The deadline was midnight Saturday. So I cannot leave it open indefinitely because I cannot keep track of who's done what. It's not fair to me, to be honest, to keep waiting and waiting and waiting on those, especially those of you who have internet. And that is the vast majority of you. There's 88 of you all at this point, and 79 of you have internet capabilities. So, and I'm aware of that because I've talked with all of your families. So I'm just telling you, if you don't have it done, you need to get up and get it done. You need to turn me off right now and get on to your Google Classroom and get it finished. Those of you who have done it, thank you. I did not touch them over spring break. I deserved a break too. And it takes quite a bit of time to get through all of those. Those of you who did it, you realized that your scores were not what they should be. I have to go in and hand grade and change the scores for all of the extended responses. So hopefully I'll get to all of those that have been turned in today and get all of those corrected and changed. So that you'll have a true score that will pop back up on your Google Classroom for you to see. All right, great. So now we are starting week 2, Team Talk day 1. That's how all of your Google assignments will be labeled this week for the next 2 weeks, I guess I should say. Today will be, you found me, so apparently you know how it's labeled. It's Kim Dunn, The Giver, Week 2, Team Talk Day 1. Tomorrow will be listed as Kim Dunn, The Giver, Week 2, Day 1, Part 1, because we never get through all of a day in one day. So you all need to be aware of that's how they're going to be listed. I will have the links on your stay-at-home days. So all you have to do is click the links like the week of before spring break. Should be easy enough for you to find them just like before. So we're just going to pick right back up where we left off. Our end in mind this week is an end in mind that we have done in 5th grade, and I want to say that we've done it once this year, but like all of our skills, they kind of rotate around. They're building on one another. And this is a skill that you're going to need I'm also in 7th grade, and the thing is that the literature should be getting more difficult with each year, how you build. So, your end in mind, and I'm going to hold it because I realize sticking it back there, it's up, but you can't always see it, will be, I will compare and contrast events, characters, and situations in our story. So, it's all about comparing and contrasting. But one of the things I've noticed when we did Number the Stars, for instance, in 5th grade, is we were comparing and contrasting characters. One of the things that it's asking us to do now, though, that some of my students struggle with, is looking at not just characters, but we're thinking about situations that are going on, as well as special events. So those two seem to be the most difficult, and that's where we will hopefully be focusing a lot of our attention in this skill type questions this week. All right, so that is what we're looking at. So let me hang it back up. Now, vocabulary, nothing too crazy going on. We have prohibited, which means not allowed. So it was prohibited to go to Cumberland Falls starting this weekend. They decided to close down that particular state park because of the coronavirus. So it was prohibited to go there, not allowed. We have diminished. Diminished means lessened. So let's move on to the next one. Unintentional is accidental. That's when you're at the dinner table and it was an unintentional thing when you knocked over your glass of milk or your glass of pop or your glass of water. It was accidental. And so, you know, if it's an accident, most of the time parents will be like, it's okay, don't worry about it, you know, because we realize that it was an accident. It was unintentional, meaning not intentional. Obsolete, oh my gosh, is old and outdated. Child of mercy. I have felt so obsolete trying to figure out this technology that goes with YouTube and linking things, and so I have never felt so outdated in my life. You guys have heard me say in the classroom, I'm technologically challenged. Whew, it's tested me, let me tell you. Obsolete. Comprehend is being able to understand something. And that is what I usually do in the classroom while I'm doing random recorder or pulling our sticks. When I'm asking questions and I do that, I want to make sure that you can comprehend the skill that we're addressing that particular week. So comprehend is to understand. Relinquished is gave up. I relinquished control of my classroom when we had to come and do this stay-at-home work. Relinquished means I just can't do it. Somebody else has got to take it. You all do it. You gave it up. Lingered is stay around. And for those of us who are practicing Christians, it's not unusual after the church service on Sundays or Wednesday evenings for parishioners to have lingered outside of the church, talking with people, catching up with friends. So lingered is stayed around. And neglected is forgotten. I have some flower beds outside right now that are pretty neglected. They are starting to get covered in weeds from the warm weather that we had during spring break, and they look like they have been forgotten, very unloved at this moment. So I've got to get out there when it finally warms back up and do some weed pulling and mulching. So these are the vocabulary that we're going to be listening for in our stories to get them in context. It's one thing to be able to spit out a word and a definition. It's totally another thing to be able to look at that word in how it is truly used in the context of the story. And that's what I'm always most interested in. Do you see the connection of the word and the usage of the word? And so that's what we're going to be working on this week. Now, when our story ended, Jonas was at the ceremony of 12s, and a very unusual thing took place. Everybody else was getting their assignments, and when they got to him and he was ready to get up, they skipped him. And it was very, very unusual for that to take place. Jonas was bewildered. He didn't know what was going on. And the people out in the audience were also like murmuring and moving. They were becoming quite nervous also about what just took place. And so that's where we're going to pick up. So let me grab my book. Sorry, got a little close there. Well, let's go back to this compare and contrast real quick. Let's think about, hold my book because we'll go right there in a minute. I want you to think about doctors and veterinarians. And how are doctors and veterinarians alike? Well, there's a couple ways that they're alike. One way is that they both use their medical training to help others. They're helping others. Another way that they are alike is that they both require a great deal of college education. But how are doctors and veterinarians different? That's an easy one. Doctors actually perform their medical skills on humans, where veterinarians practice their medical skills on animals of some sort. So when we're thinking about comparing and contrasting, that is our skill. And we've just compared and contrast. We want to say characters, I suppose, but people. And that's all they're asking us to do. Now, like I said earlier, that is the most easiest form for us to compare and contrast. What we'll be working on, hopefully, will be more about events and situations in our story. All right, so I'd like us to go to page 74. Let me get my bookmark out. Well, chapter 8. The audience was clearly ill at ease. They applauded at the first assignment, but the applause was piecemeal. No longer a crescendo of united enthusiasm. There were murmurs of confusion. Jonas moved his hands together, clapping, but it was an automatic, meaningless gesture that he wasn't even aware of. His mind had shut out all of the earlier emotions, the anticipation, excitement, pride, and even the happy kinship with his friends. Now he felt only humiliation and terror. Well, the chief elder waited until the uneasy applause subsided, and then she spoke again. I know, she said in her vibrant, gracious voice, that you are all concerned, that you feel I have made a mistake. And she smiled. The community, relieved from its discomfort very slightly by her benign statement, seemed to breathe more easily, but it was very silent. And Jonas looked up. I have caused you anxiety, she said. I apologize to my community. And her voice flowed over the assembled crowd. We accept your apology, they all uttered together. Jonas, she said, looking down at him, I apologize to you in particular. I caused you anguish. I accept your apology, Jonas replied shakily. Please come to the stage now. Well, earlier this day, dressing in his own dwelling, he had practiced this kind of jaunty, self-assured walk, that he hoped he could make to the stage when his turn came. All of that was forgotten now. He simply willed himself to stand and to move his feet that felt weighted and clumsy to go forward up the steps and across the platform until he stood at her side. Well, reassuringly, she placed her arm across his tense shoulders. Jonas had not been assigned, she informed the crowd, and his heart sank. Then she went on, Jonas has been selected. Well, he blinked. What did that mean? And he felt a collective questioning stir from the audience. They too were puzzled. In a firm, commanding voice, she announced, Jonas has been selected to be our next receiver of memory. But then he heard the gasp, the sudden intake of breath drawn sharply in astonishment by each of the seated citizens. He saw their faces, their eyes widened in awe. And still, he did not understand. Such a selection is very, very rare, the chief elder told the audience. Our community has only one receiver. It is he who trains his successor. We have had our current receiver for a very long time, she went on. And Jonas followed her eyes and saw that she was looking at one of the elders. The community of elders was sitting together in a group, and the chief elder's eyes were now on one who sat in the midst, that seemed oddly separated from them. It was a man Jonas had never noticed before, a bearded man with pale eyes. He was watching Jonas intently. We failed in our last selection, the chief elder said solemnly. It was 10 years ago when Jonas was just a toddler. I will not dwell on the experience because it causes us all terrible discomfort. Jonas didn't know what she was referring to, but he could sense the discomfort of the audience. They shifted uneasily in their seats. We have not been hasty this time, she continued. We could not afford another failure. Sometimes, she went on, speaking now in a lighter tone, relaxing the tension in the auditorium, we are not entirely certain about the assignments, even after the most painstaking observations. Sometimes we worry that the one assigned might not develop through training every attribute necessary. 11s are still children after all. What we observe as playfulness and patience, the requirements to become nurturer could, with maturity, be revealed as simply foolishness and indolence. So we continue to observe during training and to modify behavior when necessary. But the receiver in training cannot be observed, cannot be modified. That is stated quite clearly in the rules. He is to be alone, to be apart, while he is prepared by the current receiver for the job which is the most honored in our community. Alone, apart, Jonas listened with increasing unease. Therefore, the selection must be sound. It must be a unanimous choice of the committee. They can have no doubt, however fleeting. If, during the process, an elder reports a dream of uncertainty, that dream has the power to set a candidate aside instantly. Well, Jonas was identified as a possible receiver many years ago. We have observed him meticulously. There were no dreams of uncertainty. He has shown all of the qualities that a receiver must have. With her hand still firmly on his shoulder, the chief elder listed the qualities. Intelligence, she said. We are all aware that Jonas has been a top student throughout his school days. Integrity, she said next. Jonas has, like all of us, committed minor transgressions, and she smiled at him. We expect that. We hoped also that he would present himself promptly for chastisement, and he has always done so. Courage, she went on. Only one of us here today has ever undergone the rigorous training required of a receiver. He, of course, is the most important member of the committee, the current receiver. It was he who reminded us again and again of the courage required. Jonas, she says, turning to him, but speaking in a voice that the entire community could hear. The training required of you involves pain, physical pain. Well, he felt fear flutter within him. You have never experienced that. Yes, you've scraped your knees and falls from your bicycle. Yes, you crushed your finger in a door last year. And Jonas nodded, agreeing as he recalled the incidents as it accompanied misery. But you will be faced now, she explained gently, with pain of a magnitude that none of us here can comprehend because it is beyond our experience. The receiver himself was not able to describe it, only to remind us that you would be faced with it, that you would need immense courage. We cannot prepare you for that. But we feel certain that you are brave, she said to him. He did not feel brave at all, not now. The fourth essential attribute, the chief elder said, is wisdom. Jonas has not yet acquired that. The acquisition of wisdom will come through his training. We are convinced that Jonas has the ability to acquire wisdom. That is what we looked for. Finally, the receiver must have one more quality, and it is one which I can only name, but not describe. I do not understand it. You members of the committee will not understand it either. Perhaps Jonas will, because the current receiver has told us that Jonas already has this quality. He calls it the capacity to see beyond. Well, the chief elder looked at Jonas with a question in her eyes, and the audience watched him too. They were silent. And for a moment, he froze, consumed with despair. He didn't have it. Whatever she had said, he didn't know what it was. Now was the moment when he would have to confess to say, no, I don't know. I can't. And throw himself on their mercy. Ask their forgiveness, to explain that he had been wrongly chosen, that he was not the right one at all. But when he looked out across the crowd, the sea of faces, the thing happened again. The thing that had happened with the apple. They changed. He blinked and it was gone. His shoulders straightened slightly. Briefly, he felt a tiny sliver of sureness for the first time. She was still watching him. They all were. I think it's true, he told the chief elder and the committee and the community. I don't understand it yet. I don't know what it is. But sometimes I see something, and maybe it's beyond. And she took her arm from his shoulder. Jonas, she said, speaking not to him alone, but to the entire community of which he was a part. You will be trained to be our next receiver of memory. We thank you for your childhood. Then she turned and left the stage, left him there alone, standing and facing the crowd, which began spontaneously the collective murmur of his name. Jonas. It was a whisper at first, hushed, barely audible. Jonas, Jonas, then louder and faster. Jonas, Jonas, Jonas. And with the chant, Jonas knew. The community was accepting him and his new role, giving him life the way they had given it to the new child, Caleb. His heart swelled with gratitude and pride. but at the same time, he was filled with fear. He did not know what this selection meant. He did not know what he was to become or what would become of him. Now, let's think of our end in mind here. So after reading this whole section, I can contrast Jonas's ceremony of 12 with the other kids' ceremony of 12. Jonas's ceremony is more special and unique. While the other kids receive what I would call a regular assignment during their ceremony, Jonas is selected rather than assigned. He is selected to be this very special receiver of memory. We know that it's special because there's only one. Nurturers, there could be, 6 or 8 chosen at the ceremony of 12. People to work in the fish hatchery, there could be 10. But there's only one receiver of memory. And that doesn't mean one every year. It's one for an extended period of time. I mean, they hadn't chosen one in 10 years. And it sounds as if that particular person didn't work out. So this is a huge, unique kind of honor. I'd like you to take your team talks out for me. And kind of sit down for a moment. And I want you to break your questions down as I read them. I'm going to kind of get mine over here. It says, in 1 or 2 sentences, summarize the way Jonas responds to his selection. And so I want you to remember that a summary does not require textual evidence. It is, you've read the passage, and now you're just going to tell me in your own words how he responds to the selection. Number 2, explain how Jonas's treatment by his friends after the ceremony differs from how they treated him before. You might as well circle that one. That's going to be one of our Google Classroom questions. I'm just going to be honest. It is with our end in mind. We know that because it's talking about how was he treated before the ceremony to how is he treated now. The ceremony would be our event that took place. So that's the anchor. So before the event, how did his friends treat him? And then after the event, how do his friends treat him? Number 3, which rule or rules bother Jonas the most? And how can you tell? And number 4, receivers of memory are allowed to do all of the following except. All right, so one of the things that I am trying to make myself do, because of some of my students had difficulty pinpointing evidence because the stories, there were so many pages, and I did all of the reading instead of breaking it down and letting you guys partner read or do a silent read. It was difficult for you to pinpoint where the evidence started. So your evidence for these 4 questions are going to start on page 82 today. And evidence will stop on page 90. So 82 through 90. All right. So here we go. Now, for the first time in his 12 years of life, Jonas felt separate, different. He remembered what the chief elder had said, that his training would be alone and apart. But his training had not yet begun, and already upon leaving the auditorium, he felt the apartness. Holding the folder she had given him, he made his way through the throng, looking for his family unit and for Asher. People moved aside for him, and they watched him, and he thought he could hear whispers. "Ash," he called, spotting his friend near the row of bicycles. "Ride back with me." "Sure," Asher smiled, his usual smile, friendly and familiar. But Jonas felt a moment of hesitation from his friend, an uncertainty. "Congratulations," Asher said. "You too," Jonas replied. "It was really funny when she talked about the smacks. You got more applause than almost anybody else." But the other new 12s clustered nearby, placing their folders carefully into the carrying containers on the backs of the bikes. In each dwelling tonight, they would be studying the instructions for the beginning of their training. Each night for years, the children had memorized the required lessons for school, often yawning with boredom. Tonight, they would all begin eagerly to memorize the rules for their adult assignments. "Congratulations, Asher," someone called. Then that hesitation again. "You too, Jonas." Asher and Jonas responded with congratulations to their group mates. Jonas saw his parents watching him from the place where his own bicycles were waiting. Lily had already been strapped into her seat, and he waved, and they waved back, smiling. But he noticed that Lily was watching him solemnly, her thumb in her mouth. Well, he rode directly to his dwelling, exchanging only small jokes and unimportant remarks with Asher. "See you in the morning, Recreation Director," he called, dismounting by his door as Asher continued on. "Right, see ya," Asher called back. Once again, there was just a moment when things weren't quite the same, weren't quite as they had always been through the long friendship. Perhaps he had imagined it. Things couldn't change with Asher. The evening meal was quieter than usual. Lily chattered about her plans for volunteer work. She would begin, she said, at the nurturing center, since she was already an expert at feeding Gabriel. "I know," she added quickly when her father gave her a warning glance. "I won't mention his name. I know I'm not supposed to know his name." "I can't wait for tomorrow to come," she said happily. And Jonas sighed uneasily. "I can," he muttered. "You've been greatly honored," his mother said. "Your father and I are very proud." "It's the most important job in the community," Father said. "But just the other night you said that the job of making assignments was the most important." Mother nodded. "This is different. It's not a job, really. I never expected." And she paused. "Well, there's only one receiver." But the chief elder said that they had made a selection before and that it failed. What was she talking about? Both of his parents hesitated. And finally his father described the previous selection. "It was very much as it was today, Jonas. The same suspense, as 111 had been passed over when the assignment was given. Then the announcement, when they singled out the one." And Jonas interrupted. "What was his name?" His mother replied, "Her, not his. It was a female. But we are not to speak the name or to use it again for a new child." Well, Jonas was shocked. A name designated not to be spoken indicated the highest degree of disgrace. "What happened to her?" he asked nervously. Both his parents looked blank. "We don't know," his father said uncomfortably. "We never saw her again." And a silence fell over the room, and they looked at each other. And finally, his mother, rising from the table, said, "You've been greatly honored, Jonas, greatly honored." So I'm going to stop the reading right there, even though there are a few pages left. We'll pick these up in tomorrow. But what I would like you to do is I want you to answer questions 1 and 2 in your journal. So I'd like you to do that for me for tonight, because that should take you about 10 minutes or so, and that'll put us right about where we want to be, between 35 to 45-minute lessons. So that is your assignment for today. So I'm going to get a glass of water, and then I'll come back and film our next class period. See you in a moment.